friends, welcome back to this NPTEL course on ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. Today we'll discuss about food security. So what would be the ESD's role for food security in our country, across the globe also. So now let us come to the slide that, like for example, it covers primarily one or two SDGs. One SDG, as we can see, SDG 1 advocates for end poverty in all its forms everywhere, and SDG 2 that advocates for zero hunger in global context. So as we can see, like for example, these are various dimensions of food security. Food security is that access to income, food, etc., then availability of the food, quality food, then stability to in the access, and the utilizations, food utilizations. And these are some kind of the varieties, as you can see the clippings, that is the food security for all, food security for all. And again here is that that is the how to remove the hunger, that means the balanced diet, things, and high food security. Then that means how the pyramid, how the levels are there, like minimum to low to marginal food security to high food security. And the biggest challenge today is the food security. Biggest challenge involved at present is the food security. So how to achieve food security for all by 2030, and what would be the ESD's role? So that we'll be discussing. So before going into the depth, so now the global hunger index is there. Global hunger index is a tool that is to primarily designed to measure the rate of hunger, that is the track the hunger, both that means at all level, national level, regional level, state level, global level, etc. And it is primarily calculated every year to assess the progress and setbacks, that is in combating the hunger, and all what are the lapses, what are the gaps in the policy, where is the difficulty, all kinds, to assess all these things. Actually food global hunger index is being used to assess these parameters, the levels of hunger in different states, the same every year. So here we can say, so these are some of the, like for example, these are the compositions. What are the compositions of global hunger index? That is the these are the that is child mortality rate, primarily child mortality rate, child undernutrition, then the inadequate food supply. These are the primary domains. Then again under 5, child mortality under the age of 5, and again then child undernutrition, that is 1 to 3 years, then undernourishment. So and all these details are there that you can go through. That is the at different stages how this that is the hunger, due to the hunger, malnourishment, etc. The primarily child malnourishment, child mortality, these are the parameters. So that are going to be that used to be measured through global hunger index every year in every zone, every region, every state, and the global level as well. So let us discuss what is food insecurity. So here we are talking about food security, but before that we must know what is food insecurity. Oh, okay. So the basic definition of food insecurity is that if at all the student, the people, they don't have the physical, social, economic access to sufficient, safe and nutrition food which meets their dietary needs and the food preferences for an active and healthy life. This is the definition of food insecurity. So let us discuss about the food insecurity. That means the citizens, the people, if they are not being able to have the access to the physical, social, economic access to sufficient food, safe food, and the nutritious food for their healthy development, healthy life, that is called the food insecurity. So food insecurity occurs primarily because of the many reasons. So when the people there, they don't have the access to adequate nutrition food on a regular basis, or for the healthy development, or maybe their lifestyle is not that active, and then they are sometimes it is also caused by the unavailability of the food, inadequate resources of the food, natural calamities are also some of the factors. Okay, like the drought situation, situation, then the natural disasters, the pandemic issues, so many things, which also causes the n number of factors that causes the food insecurity. So again, in order to measure the food insecurity also, another scale is there, that is called the food insecurity experience scale. So UNDP has already introduced it, the food insecurity experience scale. So through which, at what level, what type of, that means food insecurity has taken place because due to what reason. So that can be measured through this scale. So this is again that we have already discussed, that is food insecurity. The parameters, like the parameters, then like to moderate to what are the difficulties, etc. These are the parameters in the scale, and these are parameters through which the food insecurity can be measured, can be assessed. So food insecurity also takes place because of the n number of factors, because the first is that famine. Famine is the fifth and the worst level. So famine too has the three conditions. Under three conditions, famine takes place. And when the famine is declared, then it must fulfill three criteria, like at least 20% of the household in an area face extreme food shortage. That is the one condition of famine to be declared. And second is 30% of the population is acutely malnourished in that locality. And children, they die from the lack of food. So if these three conditions happen, takes place in any particular region or zone, then the famine is declared. And that is the famine as per the United Nations list. So it is the famine is the fifth and the worst level of food insecurity. As you can see, this is the dry land, this is the famine, where the geophysical situation or geographical situation is like that, when the famine is being declared with three conditions. So when it has the three conditions, following conditions, then it takes place, then the famine has been declared, and it is a major source of, major cause of, you can say, insecurity, food insecurity. So some of the cases we can discuss about, like for example, in 27 years back, Afghanistan is also was facing a similar kind of drought. Even in India also, we have also faced similar, so many in the past, in the history, when we go back to the history, similar kind of things. So you can say here, emergency level of the food insecurity between the November 21 and the March 22, a nearly 35% increase. So here, as per the present assessment, that is emergency level of the food insecurity between November 21 to March 22, a nearly 35% increase from the same reason, from the same season. That is this is the present status of the food insecurity in India. So as you can see, these are the chaos because of the pandemic, because of the shutdown, lockdown, and inadequate supply of the food materials, and closing of the shops, then the especially the food food stalls, only minimum level of the vegetables and the things, and the ration shops were open. So these are the chaotic situation that we can find out in the newspaper, daily newspapers. So now here is the global pandemic extracting. This is the clipping about the world hunger, status of world hunger during this pandemic. Pandemic will also worsen the child malnutrition, and it has already affected a lot in the rural sector. So here, definitely when we focus into the sustainable development goal 1 and the 2, that is removing poverty from every sector for all, and zero hunger. So here we can say that the sustainable development goal 2 is to eliminate hunger and all forms of malnutrition by 2030. That is the focus here, and that is why we are discussing about the food security. And however, due to this COVID-19, there is a increased risk of malnutrition, due to the impact on the economic status, the economic situation in the country, impact of the social distancing, then full or the partial lockdown and quarantining, and shutting down the shops, business houses, all kinds of the things. So the business, because business went slow down, so it affected the economy of our country also. The economy is the backbone of any country. So because of this economic slowdown and the having the negative impact on the economic condition of our country across the globe also as well, it has happened. So malnutrition and increased risk of malnutrition has also uh, has also taken place, especially in the rural sector, in the village sector, and people, those who are residing in the disadvantaged situation in the communities. So many households have suffered because due to the loss of the jobs, loss of income, and sources of the supplementary foods that the schools they used to give through midday meal, etc. That has also been stopped. So these are some of the factors that affected the rural people, especially. So, and it causes causes everywhere in every household. So that all the daily labor workers, they are not they couldn't get the jobs. Daily labor workers, sure, that means small scale industries, then all kinds, that means the habitants, the laborers, the daily laborers, and all kinds of SMEs. So they who were working on the daily basis and to maintain their livelihood, they have been largely affected, greatly affected. So these are the reasons for food insecurity, malnutrition, etc., especially during this pandemic situation. So now we can say that this increase of the incidence also takes place among the older adults with severe COVID. So that has been many elderly people, they have been affected with the severe COVID-19. So, and disruptions in the food and health system, and there is also it actually threatened the maternal and child undernutrition across the low and middle income countries. So in the low and middle income countries, especially in India, also in our rural areas, rural setup also, this has been immensely affected, negatively affected the health system of our citizens in our country. So, and this COVID-19 has taught us a lesson that where it has been threatened like anything, and we are not prepared for it. So, so impact of COVID-19 in India, as you can see, that yes, there are so many things due to lockdown. That food, not only the food system was interrupted, but also transportation, then the getting the healthy and fresh vegetable, however, it becomes very expensive. Then healthcare system was overburdened, and then closing of these rural Anganwadi centers, healthcare centers. So outreach activities in the food, nutrition, and other kinds of services also were stopped. So that has also caused a havoc in our country. So these are some of the reasons, like midday meal program stopped, forced to halt due to the school closures. Migrant workers also, without any food supply, for them it also made it very worse. As we can see in the news, how the migrant workers from the Gujarats, they were, and as they were coming back to the villages by walking only, because there is sufficient transportation were not available at that time. So how it has caused their life to the hell, like miserable. They experienced the hell and the very miserable condition. Some of them also died on the way. So that is why that also caused the severe to acute malnutrition for many families living in, and without medical attention and the proper supplementary nutrition. Of course, in some areas, like in the cities, some of the urban areas, etc., food supplies were being donated or being circulated from time to time by different NGOs, by government agencies, etc. But that was not sufficient. To maintain the daily livelihood. So this this pandemic, actually, it has given us a high level of the toughest level of our in food insecurity in our country in this century. So now this is some of the parameters, some of the charts are there. You can go through it. That is that means global hunger index that shows in India what is the trend, what is the percentage, that you can go through India's position in 2021. And the under SDG 1, that is the removing poverty, no poverty, or removing poverty from all forms. So it has its targets. It has under this SDG 1, some of the targets are there, like eradicate extreme poverty. Then 1.2 is the reduce the poverty at least by 50%. Then implement the social protection system, that is in terms of policy, and then equal right to the ownership of the basic services in technology, then create the pro-poor kind of policy, gender sensitive policy, pro-poor kind of policy, then the mobilize different resources. So these are some of the targets that comes under SDG 1. Let us see how far we can discuss and we can overcome some of the things. So key indicators of the poverty. Yes, we have analyzed about the food insecurities and causes, and during the pandemic what was the situation. Now let us explore what are the key indicators of poverty, why poverty takes place, what are the causes of it. So first thing is that landlessness. If the farmers, if they don't own the sufficient land to do the agricultural things, etc., to agricultural things, production, etc. So that is landlessness. That is because of the famine, because of the natural disaster. Maybe that the lands are also not being very productive and become barren in the due process, or maybe that they were actually the labor. They were also they were only actually working as the labor. They don't own or possess the land, sufficient land. So landlessness, that is one thing. Then tiny holding with no irrigation. Even if you have the land, if there is no proper facility for the irrigation, etc., so you cannot also manage even with the manure and the fertilization. Also, you can also fertilizer. You cannot manage it. Expensive dependence of the household on the agricultural employment for the livelihood. When the farmers, they were extreme. They are only solely dependent on the agricultural employment only, and they don't have any other options, other source of income. So then that is also the major cause of the poverty. Then no diversification or the permanent migration. So if there is no diversification on the or permanent no diversification, then if they have not diversified themselves in different other activities and the businesses and the skills, etc., that is also a problem. And suppose, and some people, those who are permanently migrated to other states, so that is other places, that is also the cause. Non-ownership of the livestock, that means they don't have any kind of livestock in their disposition, in their disposal. So that is also because they are always dependent on others for this livestock material. So that is another cause. If they don't own, suppose the farmers, if they have the rice and wheat and some of the basic livestock, then they can manage it. But if they don't possess it on daily basis, they are purchasing, buying and leading their lives, so that can also be a cause of the poverty, when they don't have any job and work to do, or the daily labor work also. So non-ownership of the other instruments of labor that would fetch the higher wages. So there are also some kind of other jobs, other kinds of categories of the works where they can fetch the higher wages. That is also not available. That is also they don't possess. That also non-possess. For example, the laborers, they work under a contractor. Suppose when they're with the lockdown, with the stop of with the closing of these construction companies and construction sites, etc. So definitely that means they are not getting any jobs. So because they were dependent on the particular contractor, the infrastructure of the company to do this kind of construction work. So withdrawal of the children from the schools. So the children, when they are going to the school, at least they are getting some kind of nutritious food to midday meal. Or small children to the Anganwadis also, they were also getting. ICDS also was running the some of the programs. So, and sometimes what happens, sending the children for the work also. When the child labor is there, that means in the villages also, the parents, they send the children to the field, to the paddy field, the agriculture land, etc., to help their parents, etc. That is also another cause. So these are the key indicators of poverty. And besides this also, there are other indicators, key indicators of the poverty, why poverty takes place. So again, very poor housing condition, like unable to maintain it periodically, that means there is no guarantee, there is no food security on daily basis or weekly basis. So that is another condition, like very poor, or the low socioeconomic status, that is people who are living below poverty line, etc., unable to source the credit beyond a limit. Even if they can make the both ends meet through the credit, but again there are the limits also, credit limit, how long they can, how to what extent they can take. The large number of dependent on the households, like suppose it's a big family, large family, joint family with aging parents are there, elderly persons are there, that is also belonging to ST, SC and OBC communities also, they have certain setbacks in their communities also. Then lack of social capital to assess any program meant for them sponsored by the state. So maybe that immediately there are no such programs to help them out immediately. So lack of social capital is also there. So that is another reason, and no other skill other than the agriculture labor or the skills that are not in demand. So in this kind of crisis, in the critical situation, if you are only an agriculture labor, you don't have any other skill to engage yourself or can earn your bread and butter. So that also creates a problem. So that is why nowadays we're emphasizing on the skilled manpower, and not only the skill in only one domain, but we must have an alternative knowledge and skills so that we are better prepared for any kind of emergencies. So the poorest of the poor have added characteristics, that is those people who are living below poverty line. So they have the another more pathetic conditions, like destitute with no resource, no relative, no helping hand, etc. Unable to participate even in the labor market, unable to seasonally migrate, seasonal time from time, unable, they don't have this much money to migrate to other places, unable to eat regularly, adequately. So these are the parameters, and these are the conditions of the people who are living below poverty line. Depend on others for several things, including sometimes food and etc. Completely dependent that they are living below poverty line. The children were never enrolled or withdrawn from any kind of school, unable to access the free medical help due to lack of resources. That means they are utterly poor and poorest of the poor in the country, and they are having this kind of specific characteristics. So these are the indicators of the severe poverty. So when we talk about the livelihood, the components of the livelihood, we can categorize it into different capitals, like description of the capitals. Like when we talk about the human capital is the labor force participation, literacy, education, skill-based education, skill-based jobs, then health knowledge, etc. We can say that these come under health capital, human capital. The natural capital is not definitely depends on the livestock holding, lands, agricultural lands, common property resources. These are the natural capital which you get either from your family or from you have procured it or you have bought it, you have made it. So these are the natural capital that we get it from our earth, from our land property especially. Physical capital, you can say instruments of the labor, consumer durables, irrigation instrument, community owned physical capital. So these are the physical capital that we can take into account, that is consumer durables, irrigation instruments, all kinds of the physical capital which help us in any kind of that means livelihood stocks, that means production, consumption, etc. Then financial capital, of course, the rupee, money, savings, debt, cash, all kinds of things, gold, etc. Social capital is that self-helping groups, Gram Sabha, Panchayats, then NGOs working in these areas, that is the social capital, that is the helping out, that is support system that is the social support system, that is the social capital. So when we categorize each component into different capitals, we can find out that primarily these five capitals: human capital, natural capital, that is from the natural resources that we get, that is land holding, property, etc. Physical capital, that is the you can say the instruments, the irrigation instruments, consumer goods, community owned, etc. So these are primarily in financial capital and the social capital. So these five types of capitals actually can be should be managed properly to remove the poverty or to achieve our sustainable development goal. So now next class we will discuss about its details and its its management, so how the capital should be managed and what are the other things. Right now I'll stop here. So we'll continue with this topic in the next class. Thank you.